Hola. ¿Sí? Buenas tardes. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I have the huge task to keep alive this session, having in mind that we are at the lunch time. Then please tell me that everyone is awake. Everyone is awake? Are you okay? Are you ready for this session? Yes? No? Are we dying? Do you have lunch? We have an incredible panel with us today. Then thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I want to say thank you for the people that is connected. We are live streaming this session. I want to say, of course, thank you for all the people to be at this time. We are going to start by seeing a video. I just like, sorry. I'm really sorry. Yes. A video about our food bank in Latin America, the Peruvian food bank, and the amazing work that they are doing.
En Perú, casi la mitad de la población padece hambre. De hecho, cada vez eso viene en aumento. La pandemia hizo que un gran porcentaje de la población ahora ya no tenga acceso a alimentos. Sin embargo, en Perú se pierde más del 30% de los productos que se producen. Entonces estamos hablando de que no faltan alimentos, existen alimentos y tenemos que aprender a redistribuirlos y gestionarlos. Y eso hace el Banco de Alimentos. Lo que hace el Banco de Alimentos es recuperar alimentos sin valor comercial para donarlos a las personas que realmente lo necesitan. En Perú podríamos estar alimentando casi el 70% de la población que padece hambre si esos alimentos se gestionaran de manera adecuada. Por eso es muy importante poder hacer clic entre el hambre y el desabastecimiento, o mejor dicho, entre el desecho de alimentos.
Thank you very much. Moving to a circular food system can dramatically lower emissions, reduce food waste, and increase the food supply. By applying the concept of a circular economy to the global food industry, including food production and consumption, we can make significant shifts in government, business, and consumer behaviors that will benefit people and the planet. And that is the main conversation that we are going to have for the next 50 minutes. And we want to have you participating. We are going to invite you to participate with some questions and optics about your vision of the food systems and circular economy. I would like to present our speakers today, our panelists. We are going to start by our Honorable Jacqueline Amoin, Member of the Parliament in Uganda. Jacqueline. Yes, please. It's not coming other video, don't worry. We are not going to have more videos. Nico Jansen, Program Manager, Agriculture Livelihoods from IKEA Foundation. Hi, Nico. Hi. Nice to have you again here with us. Wonderful. David Rogers, International Director of RAP. Thank you, David. Dorothy, our Global Food Sustainability Lead in Unilever. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, the conversation is going to be about circular economy, and we would like to invite David to start by explaining us what are we speaking about when we are talking about food system circular economy, what that means, what that includes. And after, we want to invite you to keep in your mind examples that can be similar about what your organization is doing, what you are doing from the circular economy perspective. David, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, so David from RAP, and we work a lot on circular economy in a lot of different sectors. And the thing that people always ask us is, what does a circular economy in X mean? And we try to answer by giving three things for people to think about so that it becomes quite easy for people to conceptualize. And so in the food system, we think about it in three things. First of all is to think about that when food becomes waste, it has a huge economic and environmental impact. So the first thing is to not let food ever become waste. Always treat it as a resource. There may be surplus food, but not waste. So the first thing is prevention. Prevention is king. It's the most impactful way to save the environmental and economic harm. So there's some examples of things that we're seeing now. For example, using AI for better forecasting and predicting of when crops can be grown and harvested and put into the supply chain. Peak forecasting and pricing with retailers, which help to make the most of the food that's grown. So the second thing then is redistribution of surplus. And we've heard quite a lot about that today. Obviously, Global Food Banking Network are doing a fantastic job. We work with a number of food banks around the world. And we've seen some really great examples. So through the UK's work, we've redistributed, I think, 400 million meals over the course of the voluntary agreement that we run in the UK. And we've heard today already from Mariana from BAMEX in Mexico about the number of meals that they redistribute each year, and the same from our partner INDA in Indonesia. So these are great. The role of the food banks in redistributing food is amazing. And then the final thing is, if food can't be used, not every bit of food is suitable for redistribution, then can it be used in another way? And one of the things we really like is black soldier fly larvae, using the larvae as an alternative protein for animal feed to help reduce the food down to a compostable and usable product. So just some ideas about those, and you start to get that system functioning, then you've got a bit of a circular system for food.
David, thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable Jackie, she invited us to call her Jackie. And I would like to ask you from the Parliament, what is your vision between about the connection between climate and food systems, and what are you doing right now?
Okay, thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to appreciate the fact that you're here to listen to us. And like I was already introduced, my name is Jacqueline Amongin. I'm from Uganda, and I chair the Africa Parliamentarians Network on Climate Action, where we pursue addressing climate and food-related policies within our parliamentary engagement. So ours, as members of parliament, is strengthen the niche of parliaments so that they are able to come up with effective legislations that can enable the implementation of the food systems, strengthening food systems in our countries. So you find that as parliament, when we're talking about the strengthening food system, for us as parliaments, what we are doing is to ensure that we put in place legislations and policies that can enable reduction on food loss and wastage. So, for example, in the Parliament of Uganda, we came up with a food and nutrition legislation that can enable each one to have access to food. Stuntation is still very big. It's still very huge in Africa because of lack of food, but it's even worse when we talk about the linkage, the nexus between food access and climate change. As we speak right now, I come from the eastern part of Uganda. And as we're here, I am told most of the farmers in the eastern part, including my own area where I come from, they have had a lot of floods. So all the foods have been destroyed. So you cannot talk about climate change without referring it to food, because it's every day that everyone must eat. You cannot move without eating. And therefore, when there are droughts, which destroy our crops, when there are floods, which destroy the farmers' plantains, then definitely climate change is more profound and the food loss is obviously realized. So for us as legislators, it's just to see how we come up with legislations that strengthen government systems in order to be able to implement and reduce on food loss and wastage. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Jackie. Nico, your perspective about food system circular economy from the IKEA Foundation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for being here and showing interest in this very important topic. I think in previous sessions we looked at the magnitude of food loss and waste, which is 30% roughly of all food produced is never consumed. Well, it's the only industry in the world that allows this to happen without being punished for it. It's not being punished by its investors, it's not being punished by its consumers, it's not being punished by even its institutions. So I think that's also why we as a philanthropy have decided to engage more and to bring this more to the forefront, that people start to be aware of what the problem is. But not just as an advocacy tool, but also as a tool like in countries as Uganda, to work on the ground with stakeholders, with emerging entrepreneurs, with farmers, with financiers, to see how we can tackle this, how we can turn a linear system of let's produce food, let's consume it, and let's throw the rest away, into a circular system where waste or losses are in the first place prevented, and whenever they occur, because they will occur, are upscaled and repurposed as much as possible. For instance, we're working with on farmer training, how to reduce losses in your season, how to better connect to markets so that you know what to produce when. But also, a large part of foods get wasted, especially or lost in many African conditions, because of very weak food logistics. So how can we invest in cold chain development that suits the needs of people, that they can store their produce for a few days to get it to the market? If you work with small vegetable producers, they maybe harvest a bit, but if they can store it for 2 or 3 days, they have enough volume to actually get it economically feasibly to a market and then sell it again. So it's every time rethinking what do people need, and how then can we answer that need with a localized solution to innovate. And I think last, what Dave said, a lot is also at the end of the system, there will always be a bit of waste. How can we repurpose that into compost, into other products, that we become less dependent on climate unfriendly inputs and make it much more into climate friendly inputs? Because in the end, what we take out of the soil or the water, that becomes our food. We have to take a responsibility to put it back in, and that's, I think, the nature of circularity in the first place.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nico. Dorothy, GFN and Unilever has been working for the last 15 years together to reduce food loss and waste and to keep in the supply chains the majority of the product that Unilever has been producing. Do you have any examples about circular economy in the industry?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me, and also thank you all for being here. There's a lot of different things that you could be at, and we really appreciate you choosing this one, so thanks for that. So at Unilever, we do a lot to really implement the principles of circular economy in our operations, from all the way from the field, all the way to actually educating consumers about how to have less waste and more taste. That's the tagline. And we do that through really minimizing waste from all the way from the field to the plate, and also making sure that we're reusing our byproducts and extending the shelf life of our products so that people can use them for a longer period of time so that they are not wasted. A couple of examples that we have in Spain with our tomato farmers, we've worked with them to make sure that they have the equipment to be able to harvest the maximum amount of tomatoes. So we've changed the type of harvesting mechanisms that they use, and we've also taught them to make sure that they harvest at different times to make sure they get the maximum amount of tomatoes. We've also worked with them to utilize different parts of the tomatoes for different things. So we have a lot of different products in Unilever, particularly through the Knorr brand and also through some of our ketchups and sauces, where we use a lot of different types of tomatoes. So we use the skins to go into the powders, so none of the skins are wasted. We use some of the green tomatoes to actually be mixed in with other types of tomatoes for our wet soups and also for our dry soups. And we utilize some of the byproducts as a result of those processes to actually go into our spice mixes. So we really try to use every single part of the tomato, and that's one of our many examples. As many of you know, we do have a lot of ice cream brands in Unilever as well, and that's a big source of waste. So what we did with our Cremissimo brand is we actually created a product called the Cremissimo, I'm probably saying that wrong, Chocolate Hero, which is actually produced from the lines of our ice cream that would be thrown away as a result of us changing the flavor over. So whenever you change the flavor of ice cream in the production line, you waste a huge amount of ice cream. So we've saved that, and it goes into a product called the Chocolate Hero. So it always does have chocolate, but it has a mix of different flavors of ice cream, and it sells really, really well. And through that, we've been able to actually save about 300,000 tubs of ice cream. So we have a commitment to have the amount of food waste in our operations by 2025, and we've already gotten to 35%. And those are some of the examples of how we've gotten there. And through our Hellmann's brand, that's really the behavior change program, which is really proven to help people decrease waste at home, because we know that's really a huge, huge cause of waste. And we've utilized the tagline, "Make taste, not waste," to really help people, to inspire them, to educate them, and to enable them to utilize Hellmann's mayonnaise to make their leftovers taste better. And we even have had a Super Bowl campaign in the last 2 years to tackle food waste, using one of the football players each time, where they did some type of a fun stunt where they tackled food waste in the home. So that's been really, really phenomenal and really well done, and it's really proven to change behaviors. And the aim is to enable 100 million consumers every year through 2025, and we've gotten there already through 2020, from 2020 until now, in Brazil and also mainly in the United States.
That is amazing. We saw at the Super Bowl, then was amazing. Thank you very much. The change starts by us. We cannot change the world at once, but we can start by our actions. I want to invite you to share with us, from your personal and professional perspective, how you are seeing the food system circular economy. What are you doing from your organization or in your current daily? Are you taking the food that you didn't finish at the restaurant? What are you doing with the food that you have in your house? Maybe if someone wants to share with us, or from your company or organization that you represent.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the diversity of the panelists on this particular topic. I wanted to share a little bit. I'm from Canada, and I used to work at the Black Creek Community Farm, which is an urban agriculture center right in the heart of the city, 8 acres of land. And one of the issues that the city of Toronto tried to tackle is around food waste and actually preventing food from landing up in the landfills. Some of the neighborhoods, which is seen as some of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, have also a lot of fruit trees. And a lot of the fruit trees, of course, ends up in the landfills because people are not able to utilize them well. So the city was able to partner with the farm and also make it a capacity building opportunity for women who are doing value-added products. So whether you wanted to make apple chutney or whatever else that you need to make from it, there was opportunity to take some of the fruits, so actually going house to house and picking up the fruits from the neighborhood, giving some to the food banks, but also utilizing some to make different products that then these women can sell in their neighborhood to earn a bit of income as well. And then also, of course, utilizing some of it as compost for the farm to then be able to use on the fields and the type of work that they do. So I think those type of initiatives, of course, are very, very important. But I have a question, if that's also allowed, was around the fact that, a lot of food waste actually happens on the field, on the farm, before it actually ends up even in the grocery stores or in our fridge. And I'm really curious, maybe from the panelists, if they want to share a little bit in terms of what, like, for instance, Unilever, I'm sure you source from different corporations and farms. What are some of the steps that you're taking to ensure that we don't lose the food actually on the field before it even ends up in the field? And a big part of it when you hear is that, food gets rejected. So for instance, you have a box of banana and there is one rotten banana in it because of whatever quality standards that we're looking for in our food, then the whole box gets rejected and the farmer gets stuck mainly with the debt and the cost of that. So I'm really curious to hear, what are some ways that corporations can support farmers, especially small-scale farmers, to reduce food waste from the farm, from the field, before it even gets to the field. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll give an additional example in relation to what we do on the farm, in addition to the one that I talked about in southern Spain. So I'm going to talk about tomatoes again. But we source a lot of tomatoes. So we work together with a collaborative called the Sahyadri Farms in India. And it's a bunch of smallholder farmers, and they work to grow tomatoes. And together with them, we've collectively created a competition where they have to take a picture before and after they pick their tomatoes. So they have to be able to say, why they didn't pick certain tomatoes on the farm, why they left any tomatoes on the farm, and also there's a competition on what percentage they do leave on the farm. So if you don't leave any, then you get great points, and you actually get financially incentivized through the collaborative to make sure that you get all your tomatoes, because at times it's hard to pick them, or they don't pick them because it's mushy, and we encourage them to pick them even if they are mushy, because we are using them in ketchup. So that's for Kisan ketchup in India. So through the competition of the multiple smallholder farmers, we've actually increased the amount of tomatoes that are even simply picked, because we can use all the tomatoes. So in the instance of Unilever, we actually can use most of the tomatoes. They're hardly ever rejected if they're going into ketchup, because they can be mushy, because they're going to get mushed up anyway. We utilize the skins in our ketchup already, so we use all different types, because they're going to mainly come out to be bright red, even if you have a couple of them that are not bright red. So through that competition, we were able to really decrease on-farm waste. Another good way to actually utilize the farm is to make sure that farmers understand that cover crops can actually be consumed and really utilized as a second source of income. So through some of the programs that we're doing to implement regenerative agriculture practices, we are helping our farmers understand the use of cover crops to naturally nourish the soil between harvests, and also making sure that they are utilizing cover crops that can actually be used that are demanded for, right? So there's a variety of different types of cover crops. And if you make sure that the cover crop that they're using is something that they can also sell, you're providing them with an extra source of income, almost double in some cases, and also you're not wasting that cover crop. A lot of the time the cover crop is grounded up and goes back into the soil, and there are some cover crops that of course can't be consumed. So we try to utilize cover crops that can be consumed, even if it can't be consumed by humans, if potentially then animals will consume them. So that's another really great way to decrease waste, by making sure that we're utilizing those cover crops, and then of course creating an extra source of income for the farmers.
Yeah, it took me back to something that a project that I saw in Europe a few years ago, which I really liked. Does anyone know the concept of gleaning? Yeah, food bank. Yeah. Has anyone been gleaning? Yeah. Gleaning is when the farmer has got excess crop and invites the community to come and collect the crop. So that's obviously one thing, collects the food. But then going back to the community angle that you mentioned in Toronto, one of the things that I saw happening with it was disco soups. And we get together community members, and it would either be maybe sort of migrant women who weren't speaking the first language of Spanish and therefore hadn't got the sort of social networks, or other marginalized parts of the community. And then literally a DJ would play music, and they'd take the vegetables that they got and make soup. And it was a great sort of communal interaction, had lots of other social benefits, but it was a good way to teach how to use up those things for the products that you're doing on a big scale, but on a community scale. And they also had a disco jam for in the summer when it was fruit, so you could make jams and things. I think there's something that we could all do in our local communities, right? Okay.
Thank you, David. I don't know if someone else wants to share. Perfect.
Thank you. My name is Bashir, and I'm from Somalia. I'm a director for a humanitarian organization. So the food wastage is a big issue for even with the least or people living with the lowest party in terms of poverty. And I think it is an issue related to our culture. So what also we need to keep in mind is that sometimes people are forced to waste the food, for example, at the field level or where the farmers are located. They don't have the means or the facilities to keep this production, or when they have fasted, they don't have the storage system. So it is where the most of the wastage is taking place. But also, for example, like the fishermen who are in the ocean, and they just put the net in the water, and the fish will go inside, and then they keep it for hours. So the fish will die, and then when they come at the coast, it is not anymore usable, and the temperature will change here, and the huge fish which will be wasted. But also, even if they manage to bring it at the coast, what they sometimes happens is that they just take a small part of it, and the rest also will be wasted. So what I think would be something we can suggest is the investors, or if there is a possibility where these farmers or at the field level, if they can be supported or put in the factories close to where the food is planted, so that they can receive it at the first hand. But also we try to mobilize and keep them telling what even we see at the restaurant level, they just serve with a huge, palette of food, which they know exactly will not be finished by the person. And I don't understand why they do that, because they make this is a business for them. So we try to keep them, remind them in terms of cultural mobilizations, in terms even, faith-based sensitive issues, that it is not good, it is bad, they should not waste it, they need it for tomorrow. So I think the most issue, the solution would be that we see investment or working with the farmers at the field level to receive the first harvest of the food.
Absolutely. Supporting small and medium farmers is going to be crucial to change what is happening in the agriculture sector. Nico, you wanted?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that. And I think a part of that is what we see working our models also around contract type of farmings. Agreements between farmers, communities, and market players, and not only the big companies, but also the small companies that are around. Because if you as a farmer go out with your fishing boat and you go fishing, or if you plant a crop, you want to know at the end of that cycle, is there going to be a buyer? And if not, half is wasted. And what can you do to prevent that? I think the example that you gave, is beautiful. And we see many of those small enterprises examples in Africa as well, to dry tomatoes, to dry mangoes, so they can be kept longer. Because you're dealing with seasonality. And that you will always have. Because, of course, in Europe, we're all used to just walk into the supermarket. That's not in every part of the world like that, where our food is trucked in 4 times a day to satisfy the customers. So we need to look very different at those solutions and to bring them down to the community level where they're necessary. But it also means that we got to change the way finance is looking at that. Because if finance is only interested in funding big things, while the working models are small, we need to enter into a dialogue with them that, hey guys, we got to open up new products, financial products, to fund the small local initiatives on the ground. and not just the big initiatives. Because the majority of food is informally traded in local communities. Unilever is definitely necessary, and it's a big company. But that's not the majority of food globally being traded. That goes from hand to hand, within communities, between communities. It's fresh markets, it's wet markets where it happens. And that's where the innovations in cold chain technology, better storage, better processing are necessary and need to be funded as well.
Thank you. United Nations created FAO in 1945. And one of the three reasons was that for that time, 10% of the total food that was produced in the world were lost or waste. 50 years ago, we knew that was 10%. Now we are almost 30% of the total food. Then the issue is growing. In 2016, the SDGs include, for first time, the SDG 12.3, put on the public agenda the importance to reduce food loss and waste. We just lived the worst pandemic in 2019, in 2020, and everything has been changing, and the most vulnerable populations are the ones that between the climate change and food losses and waste are suffering the situation that we are living nowadays. We are speaking that more than 700 million population is experiencing food insecurity. My question is, what we have to do to accelerate the solution of the problem? Because we are not talking just about the planet, we are speaking about people, like Alisa was mentioning before. What we have to do to accelerate, what we need to do to don't spend other 50 years seeing how the problem is growing, what we have to do to change. And I want just to say, Jackie, the Loss and Damage Fund was launched 1 week ago. What are we expecting from the Global South? What we want to see that is going to be what we are expecting that fund is going to be implemented in the communities. What are you seeing from the Parliament?
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, I've been following more into loss and damage and adaptation at the negotiations. And okay, if we came up with this loss and damage mechanism last year, and this year we're trying to put in place mechanisms for the fund, loss and damage fund. And okay, my surprise is that at the negotiations, it's like kind of a voluntary arrangement. So there is no non-committal in terms of what comes from where and who takes what. So it's a non-committal kind of arrangement put in place. Last year we celebrated that we've got a loss and damage at thematic area, which was good. But this year we are seeing different countries, especially from the global north, committing, I will do this, I will give this money, I will give the other. And at the negotiation room, I'm like, this is like, okay, I come from a least developed country, and the least emitters in Uganda, for example. Let's summarize the whole of Africa. Maybe we do less than 4% emission. And then if you look at the trends, Africa gets the highest shocks in terms of climate. All these landslides, all these droughts, all these, name them, they are in Africa. So we are saying, because we are the globe now, and there is already a loss and damage fund put in place. So negotiators are like, okay, if this fund has been put in place, let's put the mechanisms. As a lawyer, I would love that there is a text put in place so that this fund is actually, it transcends to the local person. It doesn't remain at the global level. Next year we'll go to Bonn and we'll be talking about loss and damage. But from my analysis, I look at from the previous funds on climate fund and global environment facility and all the funds that have been put in place. You actually realize that only less than 20% have gone to the least affected countries. And 43% has gone to the ASEAN countries. So then you are wondering, what is it that we are looking at? So to me, the nitty-gritties have to be clear in terms of the modus operandi on how this money is going to be utilized, which global emitter is bringing how much. How much is China, for example, bringing? How much is, for example, the USA bringing? And going to give to who? That should be very clear in the text. So that these farmers, we're talking about laws and the laws that the farmers are experiencing. How does this money trickle down to those farmers that I represent, the rural, who have been maybe they have been displaced because of heavy floods, who have been displaced because of hurricanes? That should be the terminology. But otherwise, as it is now as of today, the text is still very open. And voluntarism means that anytime I can volunteer out. Anytime I can be in or I can be out. But if there's committal, then I would know how much would be going to Asia, for example, how much would be going to Africa, despite all the people coming up together. So I think in terms of loss and damage, that's where we are as the negotiations at the COP. And probably we expect, we expect better engagements by the end of this COP, now that today we've started with the ministerial segments. But I am always, I know that the most part of the negotiation has already been done. So when the ministers come, it's really not much can be added. So I think maybe until we go to Bonn next year. So, but in the meantime, even the monies that come to the least developed countries, access to that money is a big challenge for the farmers. We are talking about, for example, in the African Union came up with a comprehensive agricultural development program, whereby you're dealing with the whole food system, strengthening the whole food system from cultivation to post-harvest handling. But this has remained a framework in paper. Implementation is nil because of probably there's so many challenges that are in place. So that's why you find that as the parliamentarians, we are looking at where is the gap? What do we need to do? And with the little resources, where can we prioritize? Obviously, strengthening food system would be a top priority because all of us will need food anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you very much. Nico, following the power of the investments and the announcement of the philanthropic roadmap where IKEA is part of, how are you seeing the investments that you are doing is going to help to transform in a circular food system?
Yeah, I think, yeah, indeed, we launched the roadmap. I think the cards are still lying outside for anybody willing to read it and interested in it. I think that there's a number of areas where we can look at levers, you know, how we can change things in the food system. And Jackie is partly referring to it. I think one of the most important ones is how do we change policies, you know, to be more positive towards food system change and to include elements like reducing food loss and waste, because that also increases resilience of farmers on the ground. It increases their security of income, and it increases also their livelihood and food and nutrition security. A second, I think, where we as philanthropic funders who organize this roadmap can look at is how we can convene people, like occasions like this, but also in many other places, both locally and globally, around that theme of food loss and waste. Because it is a theme that is dealt with many different authorities in the public system, in the private system. Whether it's national authorities, local authorities, cities versus rural, it's all there, but it needs to be somehow facilitated and coordinated and in a positive dialogue and not in a blame game. It's your responsibility, I don't touch it. agriculture doesn't stop when the harvest is done, and then somebody else takes it over. So we need those bodies on the ground to work together. And I think, a third area for us to really also look at is how do we champion this? How do we help the champions raise their voice? How do we invest in pilots, and document that and evidence that hey, things can work, and that people start to believe that we actually can do something to reduce this enormous gap in the food system that grew, as you said, from 10% to 30% now. And if we don't do anything, it's going to be 50% in 2050. So this is something we all have to look in the mirror, I think, as well, is what can I do, what can we do to change this and to reduce this and to curb this negative spiral in a way into a positive spiral. And the circular economy is a huge instrument in that, because as David said earlier, waste is basically a valuable resource in the wrong location, at the wrong use. So how can we find new uses for what we now call waste? And that's what we're searching for all together.
Thank you, Nico. Dorothy, what we need to do to accelerate the transformation in a circular food system?
Well, I think there have been a lot of really great points made, so I'm not going to repeat anything anybody's said, but just to say that absolutely agree with the important points that have been made. I think we're at an unprecedented time when it comes to malnutrition, when it comes to food not being able to be grown as a result of many reasons, a huge one of which is the result of climate change and the impact of that. And that has to enable us and really inspire us to work together in collaborations and in collaborative ways like we never have before. And I think there's a lot of that happening more now than ever in the space of the food system, big players, small players, really small players, and everywhere in between, where we really need to collaborate to say we need to build a strong supply of food that is resilient, that we maximize the yield, and that we will have food for the future. So something that Unilever has championed is the COP28 Action Agenda for Regenerative Landscapes, which has brought together more than 25 companies across the food system, where we've all said that collectively we will transform more than 160 million hectares to follow regenerative practices by 2030. And this is done together with more than 400 million farmers with an investment of committed $2.1 billion USD. And this will enable us to work together to align on what are those practices, how do we measure, report, and verify, how do we make a bigger impact, and how do we fund this? And by doing this, we will really be able to build a more resilient food system that improves biodiversity, that improves soil health, that in turn lowers the impact of food on the climate and the impact of climate on food, and also enables farmers and growers to get paid a fair wage. So these are the types of collaborations that we have to start to look at. I think in the past we were afraid to work with competitors because we were afraid that we would then become not competitive to them. And I think that time has really shifted to understand that we have to work together. We're all part of the same food system. We all need to eat. We all need to gather around and really say, what do we need to do to collectively do this? There's also a huge gap in this space of talking about and looking at women in this space. About 43% of farmers globally are women. And the FAO has reported that if women were empowered and given the education and the tools that men have, then the yield would increase by approximately 20 to 30%. That's absolutely enormous when you look at the expected increase in population paired with the increase in malnutrition and then paired with the decrease in yield that is expected. So we need to look at these different types of nuggets that are out there that we are kind of neglecting and make sure that we empower these groups to enable them to grow foods in the right way so that we can have the supply that we need. So that, of course, comes along with many other things. You know, it comes along with policy change, it comes along with trading rights, it comes along with many other pieces. But I think if we start to work together on the way that we grow our foods and start with the ground, then we can potentially work together on the way that it ends up on the plates. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. David, Rob has been working with you. We have been hearing how collaboration is one of the key elements to scale the work that we are doing and to transform the food systems. Tell us how the Rob work around collaboration is working, and if you believe that that is going to allow us to improve the food system rapidly.
Thank you, and Dorothy, you set this up perfectly. I was just going to start by saying it's so nice to hear Unilever talking about working with peers, competitors, suppliers, customers in that non-competitive space, and that's what RAP has been promoting for a number of years. So we run something that we call voluntary agreements or public-private partnerships, which brings together major retailers and brands, manufacturers, their suppliers, and government as well, so ministers. So we can look at the whole system as a one entity and encourage that collaborative, non-competitive discussion. What we find is when you track back through a supply chain, you spot where the hotspots of waste are arising, and then you really need a Unilever to sit down with a Tesco's or a Walmart and say, right, you've asked for this, we've supplied that, we bought it from our suppliers, they're telling us, it doesn't happen quite like that, let's look at the problem and work out a solution together. And we've seen that growing and growing. So that model's being repeated across the world, started in the UK, in the US, in Mexico, Indonesia, South Africa. It's really growing quite a lot, that non-competitive way of the food system coming together and working. And all the major retailers and brands that you would recognize from around the world are now engaged in that. And it's actually really driving change. So once you take out that fear of, are we going to be the first to move? A customer's not going to like it. Is it going to cost us more? Are we going to be non-competitive? And get whole sectors of the food system to move at the same time, then you get really long-lasting change, and it becomes a new way of doing business and a new habit for customers to buy, and therefore you don't have to keep on pushing the same water up a hill. I guess you kind of get there, and it becomes the new default, and that's what we love to see. And our great partners around the world that are working on this are also seeing other benefits. So innovation that comes out of that kind of collaboration, things like Food Cloud, who were here earlier, but I think they've gone to another session now, coming from Ireland and working with Tesco's to make sure that at a certain time each day, an app goes off and says, right, this is what's available in store. You've got an hour and a half to collect it, and then it will go to where it needs to go. And some other great innovations like that around the world. I know our partners in Indonesia are doing the same with the hospitality service system sector. And that's great, because that has come by those people being in a room with the big suppliers and the big retailers and being able to have access to those discussions to say, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Who's got the innovation that can solve it? And we move things forward. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you very much. I don't know if someone wants to... Michael, can you help me?
I can throw.
Thank you.
I've
Sorry.
done my job. Who's next? Is it you?
Hi there, thanks so much. My name is Frank Sheridan from the Global Greens, uniting the world's green parties in 80 different countries. I really welcomed all the input and perspectives here today, particularly from business, politics, and across process too. But I feel maybe there's a little bit of an elephant in the room we haven't addressed yet, and I'd like to have some impact on that or some feedback. Food systems are complex, we know this, and there are lots of different varieties. But I guess broadly we look at small scale and large scale agribusiness, and I guess it's the large scale agribusiness we want to draw our attention to as well, and this is the point of my question. We know that large scale agribusiness is more carbon intensive, more chemical intensive, less biodiverse, less resilient, and less gender responsive. So how do we reconcile that? We know that most of the food produced in the world is produced by small-scale farmers, but most of the problems come from large-scale agribusiness models too. So how do we reconcile that profit maximization of the large-scale agribusiness with concepts of circularity and maybe concepts of degrowth or things like that? Can they be a solution here? How do we work with this business, or how do we regulate this business to change? Because this is where the big problems really, really lie. Thank you.
Be the gender program.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's an elephant in the room often, and it doesn't seem like anybody from the elephant in the room is in the room. So I think there's a big role for, I think, us as food companies to play in really influencing the agribusiness. And of course, we work together with a lot of the agribusiness players. We could say that we kind of are. And those, of course, are the big suppliers such as ADM, Cargill, Bunge, and Louis Strauss. That's what we're talking about, right? Those big suppliers, yeah? And so what we've really been doing is collectively influencing those suppliers to change the way that we're growing ingredients. And in order for anything to really scale, we actually need them to step up. So I'm happy to say that many of them have really stepped up. Together with Bunge, which is one of our suppliers, we have committed to move to practices that are better for people and better for the planet, namely regenerative agriculture practices on many of our farms. The challenge is that in order for this to really change, we need action to come from those players as opposed to from the companies. So a lot of us, such as Nestle, Danone, Unilever, and many others in that space, are the companies that have signed up to the agreement to transform to regenerative practices and principles. In order to do that, though, because we have an in-between player, which is the agribusiness players and the traders, and we need them to actually decide that they're going to transform an entire farm, even if we don't pay for that entire farm. So a couple of things, even if we don't take the foods from that entire farm. So say a farm's as big as this square right here. You have to use your imagination now. And Unilever utilizes this much rice from this part of the farm, right? We will pay for that volume to be transformed to follow regenerative agriculture practices, which have resulted in a reduction of 50% less greenhouse gas emissions, particularly in the United States. Then that amount of rice goes into a processing plant with all of the rice. So then we actually don't know if that rice in our product actually was grown following those practices. So our role now is to make sure that the agribusiness players, the traders, pay 50% of that transition. So before, Unilever used to pay 100%. So we used to pay 100% of that transition when it came to moving to sustainable. And now we're making sure that the suppliers work with us to pay 50% of that. And then once they pay 50%, they're in the game, right? So they have skin in the game. They want to make it work. They want to make it go toward their net zero commitments as well, and toward their biodiversity commitments. And then they'll learn kind of what that means, and then hopefully they'll take it further and scale. There's also a role for us to play in the financing. So we have, in Unilever, we have the way that we finance, it's different for everybody, but the way that we finance is we have a ring-fenced amount of money that is called the Climate Nature Fund. And we utilize that to fund big projects that will help us improve our impact on climate and nature. And through that, we also have a co-financing mechanism where we can actually utilize other funds externally. You know, that can be grants, that can be philanthropic, that can be other types of things, where we utilize that co-financing mechanism to get funding to go beyond our supply. And that mechanism will enable us to work with suppliers outside of even our supply chain or further than what we're utilizing in our volume, so that we can help them to transform even further to make sure that the practices are better for people on the planet. So those are some of the things that we're really working to do. I think I am quite positive about some of our suppliers right now as we move forward. As I said, Bunge has committed to move forward with regenerative agriculture principles. Cargill just announced a conservation commitment that they have and a no deforestation commitment. So I think we are making pretty big moves in that space, and I think there's more that we can do to encourage it. And the more that we say that we need that to happen, the more that the suppliers will move, because they move on demand, right? So I think that's really something that all of us have play a role in doing.
Thank you, Dorothy. Nico.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for addressing the elephant in the room, because of course it's there. At the same time, with a growing population, a growing urbanization, it's not about, you know, deleting the private sector. It's about working together with them and holding them to account. That's, for instance, also why we, as IKEA Foundation, are funding initiatives like the World Benchmarking Alliance, who do a food and ag benchmark, a nature benchmark every 2 years. That assesses the top 300 companies in the world. And Unilever was number one this year in it. So that there is a transparent and accountable system that companies can reflect on, and they don't like to go down 2 places. So they will work very hard, you know, to every time have a green square next to them that they go up, or at least stay level. And so that is one. But I think also second, this is a new world in which we're learning a lot, and regenerative. Everybody uses the term. It's quite undefined. And that's also why, for instance, we started with a number of funders, Rockefeller, us, now also McKnight Foundation came in to support an initiative called Region 10, you know, which is working globally with an enormous amount of stakeholders, in which private sector and farmer organizations and civil society, to try to define the space, to try to come to a common outcomes definition of what should the contribution be of the food system to soil health, to water health, to biodiversity, to the environment, but most importantly also to equity and socioeconomics. So that in the end, everybody benefits from a better food system, not just the private sector who have their role to play, but also the communities who grow the food and others, who are involved in that whole system, that they get a fair wage, that they get a non-degraded environment they work with, and that they're not being forced to exploit their environment, but actually can work with nature to give back to nature and to take from nature in an equal play to produce food for us and for humanity.
Thank you, Nico. Accountability and active citizenship is going to grow and is going to be more and more important every single day, and everyone that is spending funds, public funds, are going to need to be more transparent and commitment with the work that we are doing right now. Thank you very much for being here. We have 2 more sessions at the afternoon, and we are going to close the day with a mix and mingle with food and cocktails. We are going to try to don't waste any food. Please come with us. And please join me to say thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much.